why Russia invaded Ukraine. This video is a perspective of a free-will Russian whose mind is not obscured by propaganda, who has relatives both in Russia and in Ukraine, who was able to travel and see the world, who does not rely on Russian federal TV channels as the only source of news. There are many Russians just like this, and most of us are afraid to speak out, because unfortunately at this very time we're the minority in our very own country. And besides that, we're being stereotyped by Western nations. And I'm here to change that. What's up, investors? It's the Russian Dude, and today I'll present you the events that happened between Russia and Ukraine in between late 2013 and today, which eventually led to this so-called special military operation that started February 24th, 2022. So it all starts back in November 2013, while Ukraine is getting ready to be accepted to the European Union. And the president of Ukraine at that time, who is Viktor Yanukovych, is basically already on the plane to just finalize some things. When suddenly his plane is turned around literally mid-air and the deal is gone. It is rumored that it was a direct order from Putin himself to not let Ukraine join the European Union. And since Viktor Yanukovych being the pro-Russian president, he just has no other choice other than to obey this order. Ukrainians obviously unreasonably are unhappy, and at first they start peaceful protests, which is later to be known as Euromaidan. Even in Russia, federal channels were showing the support to Ukrainians during these tough times. But then the situation escalates and Yanukovych asks Putin for help. Russia sends some people to calm down the protests, which become aggressive every single day. People start using weapons, Molotovs, and even some brutal force. And suddenly, Russian media is drastically changing its narrative. Euromaidan is now pictured as hostile and terroristic coup, which mainly targeting Russians in Ukraine, and in general just being hostile towards Russians. The main goal according to propaganda is basically to seize the power and create nationalistic country. And basically now you know where these modern Ukrainian Nazis come from. Ukrainians are still protesting, and one of the main slogans of Euromaidan at that time becomes "Kto nie skacze, tot moskal," which basically means the one who does not jump is a Moscovite. And obviously Russian propaganda focuses only on these people and makes like close-up shots of their faces, which just enhances the hostility of Ukrainians towards Russians in the minds of Russians. Euromaidan lasted for 3 months, all the way from November 2013 until February 2014. And as a result, the president Viktor Yanukovych is out of power, but Ukraine still was not able to join the European Union. And while the country is still in chaos, Russia decided to annex, basically to take the Crimea. This happened in the middle of the March of 2014, and the main justification for these actions was that Russia is saving those Russians who live on the territory of Crimea from the rage of Ukrainian Nazis. Or I mean, in modern term, according to the Ministry of Defense of Russia, this would be called liberating them. March 16, there was a referendum on this peninsula, which basically means that the residents of the peninsula were voting whether they want to be a part of Russia or not. The results of this referendum was that the residents indeed wanted to become Russians, which might sound that is not true and it is rigged, but honestly I have an uncle who lives in Ukraine and he confirms that yes, most people in Crimea actually wanted to be more Russians than they wanted to be Ukrainians. But nevertheless, all the way until now, not a single Western country acknowledged that Crimea is a part of Russia. But it was not enough. In April 2014, Donbas region in Ukraine also decided that they want to be separated from Ukraine. And the justification, as you might have guessed, is also the same, which is protection from Ukrainian Nazis who now will be targeting Russian population in Ukraine. Donbas region is mainly 2 territories, which is Lugansk and Donetsk. First, Lugansk decided to perform a referendum to separate themselves in April 2014, and then Donetsk did the same. Ukraine obviously didn't like it, and long and exhausting war started in this region, which basically lasts until now. And that is why the main narrative of Russian side at this very moment is to protect, or how they call it, liberate the residents of Donbas region and to revenge Ukraine for 8 years of genocide on that territory. Which might kinda sound like not justified and real until you realize that Russia most likely have sent its infiltrators in this region before the referendums were even considered. And most likely this so-called separation was just a small part of the whole entire grand plan all along, and they were just basically waiting for the right time to do it. Russia sent its own carefully selected officials whose main goal was to make Donetsk and Lugansk to be separated, to be independent from Ukraine. And as for now, the leader of self-proclaimed Independent Republic of Donetsk is Denis Pushilin, and the leader of self-proclaimed Independent Republic of Lugansk is Leonid Pasechnik. And yes, once again, the independence of these two self-proclaimed territories is not recognized by any Western countries. Okay, so now fast forward to present time, when Ukraine announces its intent to join NATO, as well as to take back its own territories of Donbas region, which according to Russian side, Ukraine has been humiliating and torturing for the last 8 years. And I don't know, just let me know in the comments if you think that Ukrainians killing Ukrainians on its own territory just to keep them within Ukraine makes sense to you. I mean, in my personal opinion, if my own government is trying to kill me, this will only give me more reasons to separate. And so yeah, in response to allegedly Kiev launching an attack against Donbas region, February 24, 2022, Russia sends troops to protect its residents and eventually liberate them. At this very moment, the war begins. And throughout this almost 2 months of this so-called special military operation, the goals of Russian side have been constantly changing. It went from liberating the people of Donbas to preventing the World War III. It included the denazification of Ukraine and preventing the US from becoming the dominant country of the world. So as you can see right here, Russian government itself cannot yet clearly define what it wants, let alone Russians who are getting propagandized 24/7. The freedom of speech is getting limited, and any point of view different from the official one is completely unacceptable. But you know that the war will be over one day, and the truth will eventually come out. Truth will never become different. It is the same since the beginning. The truth is constant and it won't change. The relations between people and perceptions of nations, this is what has been changing. And it is my responsibility to show you the perspective of a free-will Russian whose mind is not abstracted by propaganda.